Okay, I'm going to talk briefly about the lift. As I said, I promise not to speak more than 10 minutes. I'll try hard to keep that. I just want to tell you a little bit about kind of where we are, what we've done, and where we're headed, and give you some feel for what we hope to do. Just a very brief history of the existing lift. It was put in the building as part of the remodeling, the expansion that we did. And believe it or not, that's been 15 years ago. That lift has been a challenge from the beginning. We had a lot of trouble getting it going reliably to start with, but after a couple of years of fixing things and tweaking it, it became fairly reliable. And some of you may not agree with this, but my view is for about 10 years, it really worked pretty decent. I mean, it had its quirks and its difficulties, but it really did work well for quite a long time. It has just deteriorated over time. It's basically worn out. I mean, you could say why in 15 years, but I can just tell you the way the mechanism is built and everything, it is just worn out. We got a proposal from the supplier about 2 years ago to basically refurbish the whole thing. Just, replace everything that you can and get it working again. About that time, the original manufacturer went out of business. 6 months later, no parts are available. So refurbishing it, doing anything to it today is not an option because replacement parts are simply not available. So we started exploring alternatives. And just to give you a feel for the difficulties that we have dealt with now for 2 years, we've been working on this. Number one, there is no place in the building other than right where that lift is now that hits all 4 levels. So you cannot move it to someplace different where it'd be easier to work with. Number two, the shaft size is fixed. We're against that wall, we're against the brick wall that goes out into the gathering area, we're against the floor here, we're against the floor on the other side. What we have there is exactly and only what we have to deal with. So that's a major concern. Believe it or not, the biggest challenge has been the doors. The doors cannot be any bigger than they are now, especially in the lower level where there's a concrete beam above it that's holding up the rest of the building, and you can't move it. So we had to work with those existing door openings. Another issue is there are 4 stops. Seems natural here. These lifts are not made to do 4 stops. They're designed for 3 stops. That's about all you ever see. The people that we're dealing with now say in 20 years, they've seen one other lift of this type that has 4 stops. So that's been another challenge. It came down to being 2 possible manufacturers that we've looked at, and we've worked with both of those. One of those is the one I'm going to show you today. The other one finally gave up on the doors. They just simply said, we can't do it. You either structurally modify the building or we can't do it. Well, that guy's out, so we are down to 1 supplier that can provide a functioning, viable alternative. The current requirements are somewhat different from a code standpoint. The big issues are a couple of things. One, I'll say negative, although some of you I think will find it to be very positive. We have to put power door operators on it. You have to have a door that opens automatically when you get to the landing to get off or when you want to get on it. Well, that's great, but it really presents some challenges in terms of fitting it into the existing space. The second, from our viewpoint, is a real positive. We no longer have to have the fire-rated doors. So those big, heavy steel doors that we have on them now, we don't have to have. I have worked with the city. I've worked with the city code people. The bottom line is this building has only 2 floors. Even though we can count 4, no, officially we have only 2 floors. And that gives us flexibility in terms of the fire standards, and it allows us to not have to use fire-rated doors. That is a great benefit because we can have smaller operators then, they aren't as heavy. The disadvantage is that the top level cannot be a full door. The top level, which is the one on our main level right out here in the lobby, has to be a partial height door. It has to be at least 42 inches. I have to have a gap at the top of at least about 2 feet. The point is that if there's a fire in the elevator shaft, the smoke comes out through that opening, and you activate smoke detectors and can see it in the building. So it seems kind of counterintuitive maybe, but we have to have an opening at the top of the shaft. There are also some other differences that are more technical. There's some significant differences in how the electrical supply has to be handled. Those are things that we've got worked out, and we can live with them. The new lift that we're proposing to purchase will be made by a company called Severia. They are the biggest manufacturer today worldwide in terms of this type of lift. And as I said, they're the only one that's the only option available. So they're the ones we're working with. The installer, the person we actually buy it from, is Access Elevator. Their headquarters is in Omaha. They have a Des Moines office that's right down the street here on Bell Avenue. They've been very good to work with, very cooperative. I've been very pleased with the way they've handled things. I've talked to them and the guy at the factory on the phone. We're now on our 8th revision of drawings, trying to tweak things, get all these things covered. So again, they've been very good to work with. The new lift, well, everyone who's ever ridden in the old lift knows that it's noisy, it shakes, it rattles, it jumps as you go. The new lift will be a much smoother operation. Instead of that drive screw mechanism, it'll have a chain drive that's run by hydraulic, so you don't have any of that shaking and rattling and jogging as you go. It should be, I can only speculate, but I believe it will be much smoother, much easier, much scary, not nearly as scary to ride in. That's the first big difference. A couple of other things I already mentioned, it'll have power door operators on it, and more to say about that in a minute. But when you walk up and call the lift, when it gets to your floor, the door will open automatically. It'll stand open for 30 seconds. That gives you time to get into it. If you're in a walker or a wheelchair or cane or whatever, it gives you time to get in. The door will close automatically. You push your button to go down and you're off. Yeah, I'll tell you in just a minute, yes. The power door operator, while being really handy that way, does create a second problem. You can't have a push button to call the door or to call the car to your level where the door is going to swing out and run into you. So you got to be very careful about where you place the call button compared to the door. On 2 of the levels, we'll just put it in the door call right in the side of the door, just like it is now. On 2 of the levels, that won't work, particularly on the main level out here, the top level of the lift. We're going to have to put that call button in the wall on the left as you're facing the elevator, back about 3 feet. So you've got room to pull your walker or your wheelchair or whatever up there, push the button, and have the door swing beside you. And I've talked to a couple people, and we've kind of tried it out, and we think we know where we can do it. But that has been a significant problem of how to handle that. Things you'd never think about, when you start into saying this. So yes, it will have the operating system will be very similar to what we have today. That is, it'll have an up button and a down button. You still have to call it manually. You have to push the up button to get it to come up to you. Once you get on, you got to hold the button to keep it moving. Though it's all part of code requirements where you have a non-enclosed car, it has to be arranged so that if you get in trouble, you release the button and it stops. You can't have it run automatically. But what I'm very hopeful that we're going to be able to add, I'm about 90% right now, we will have a display at each level showing where the car is. So if you're on the second level and you want to call the car, you don't have to guess whether it's above you or below you. will have, just like a regular elevator in a commercial building, some type of display. I don't know what it's going to look like just yet, but some type of display that you can see where it is and you know whether to call it up or down. So that's one of the things I'm still working on that we have to get worked out. The other big difference, can I have my first photo, Deidre? No fire doors, so instead of fire doors, it's the door will look something like that. Now, obviously, you got to put that door in our church, but the idea is it'll be a full glass door. You can see in it, you can see the light in it, you can see where the car is, you can see it moving, and it should just make the whole thing look more open and more inviting and not so enclosed. At the top floor, though, again, if I could have my second photo, as I mentioned earlier, you can't have a full height door. So it will be the same idea, but this gate. Now, obviously, our shaft goes up, and there will be a full door opening frame there. One of the questions that we're dealing with is how high should that partial height gate be? The minimum by code is 42 inches. That's the same as the railings on the stairway. It's the same as, around the church in other places where there are openings below. I feel it would feel safer, whether it is or not, I don't know, but it would feel better if that were a little higher. And we've talked about either going to like 4 foot or, oh, okay, like that. We can make it a little higher, or I can make it as much as 5 foot. And I'm leaning toward the 5 foot. That would leave about 2 foot open at the top. That's the minimum by code requirement, but it would make the top of the door, about this high. So that kids in there at the coat rack, you walk up to it, it's darn close to being a solid wall. It's not like something that, oh man, I could hop over that if I wanted to. So I'm open to suggestions on that. I'm looking for ideas. It costs more money. I mean, everything we do costs more money. So the higher the door, the more it's going to cost us. We're talking about $1,000 to $1,500 to get a 5 foot high door. My feeling is it's well worth it, and that's probably my recommendation. But again, I'm looking for ideas from all of you. The floor displays I mentioned, I expect this one to be slightly faster than the old one. They're still slow. It will take about 37 seconds to go from the upper level to all the way to the bottom on the new one. And I think that's a little faster than the current one. But again, these aren't intended for, lots of use by lots of people. It's a spatialized use for when we need it, and it's slow. The cost, not cheap. The base cost is for the unit is $54,000. And that, fortunately, at the moment, has not gone up. That's the price I started with about over a year ago, and they just told me last week that they will hold that price through November 1st. So if we get this through the board and get it ordered, my goal is get it on order by November 1st before prices go up. In addition to that, though, we've got extra cost for the doors. We've got extra height for these indicators that show where the car is. I've got a fair amount of electrical work that I wasn't anticipating that's going to have to be done. We've got to have a fair amount of carpenter work to finish things up. Because the doors are different, we got to rip everything out. We got to, refinish after we put stuff back together. Best estimate today, about $62,000. So we're not all that much over where we hoped to be when we did the congregational vote. We said 60. We're going to be a little over, but not a whole lot.
Does that include the 5 foot door?
Yes, that includes a 5 foot door. Yes. The only question is, what is right? And that's exactly what I'm hoping, But I agree. This is not a place to skimp. I mean, this thing, it's going to run another 20 years at least. So I want something that looks good, that does the job, that's usable, that people can live with. And that's what we're trying to do. So the schedule, I hope to place an order November 1st. I've still got a couple things to finalize. It's like, what are these floor indicators going to look like? Exactly how some things are going to fit. But I'm hoping 2 weeks from now, we'll get board approval and we can place an order. Delivery, about 2 months plus. So we could receive parts in Des Moines around January 15th. The initial schedule today is do the installation the first 2 weeks of February. So we'd look at having it installed, tested, approved by February 15th. Our finishing work then's got to be done, the carpenter work. So March 1 is my goal. The end of February, March 1 of next year, I want the new lift to be operational and ready to go. Questions? Yeah. There are no parts available for the existing lift, period. I can't even get a new. You cannot do it. Simply cannot. There is nothing you can do with the existing lift, period, other than just grease it, and I've done that. The elevator people have done that. I mean, I could tell you all kinds of interesting stories about what we've done to maintain that existing lift. There's nothing more that can be done, period. Other comments, questions? Okay, I got to tell you one quick story. I had a meeting last week with the state elevator inspector because he has to approve all these things we've been talking about, and especially some of the electrical things. And so the salesman that I'm working with set up the meeting with the state elevator inspector, and we all met here. The guy walked in the door, and I thought, he looks kind of familiar. And so he came up and talked to me a minute, and he says, you taught my class when I was elevator apprenticeship. Yes, I did. 30 years ago, I did, for about 10 years, I taught elevator apprenticeship classes, and he was one of my students. So that made the conversation go much better from there on out. We agreed what could be done. He gave a little bit, I gave a little bit, and we came to a very good conclusion. So, yes. We're just going to have to live with it. We're going to have to work with people to have them come in the right door to get to the right place. I mean, you can, for auditorium, for example, we just have to come in up there and you be in back. You won't be able to get down here. It's going to be about 3 weeks. Yes, yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's a real, I mean, that is a problem. It's a concern. The alternative that we've talked about is wait until summer. Wait until June. And the elevator people would be willing to do that. We'd still order at the same time. We'd still, get it in here, but we could wait until the 1st of June. I'd rather get it in and done, but that's certainly something the board can address.
With supply chain problems, everything else would be foolish,
To,
not just do it.
well, I say we order it now regardless,
Right.
and get it here, and then we can choose when we put it in. But I want to get it on order before the prices go up. While they still say they can deliver it, I want to get it going. Other comments, questions? Again, I'm open to your comments. Call me separately, talk to me afterwards. Any ideas you've got or any questions, I'd be glad to talk about it. Obviously, I like this. I mean, I'm very enthused about the project, and I think it's going to be a good benefit for the church, and really want to see it go. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It's been a while since I've been on the lift, but the one time I was on it, I had a really careful experience. But if I remember right, the floor, it has to be right at the floor level for it to operate.
Yes. Yes.
Probably be the same case.
Yes.
That's correct?
That's correct.
And with the door swings open, right? I just remember I had to climb over someone in order to get it going.
Yeah.
You have to hold the button, and they couldn't hold the button.
Yeah.
Because it was not right at the right level.
Uh-huh.
Until someone entered in and it was a wheelchair,
Yes.
you know, so,
Yes.
um,
There are some people in this room that we have been stuck in the elevator
yeah.
and have rescued, so we all understand that.
That type of situation, where, like I said, I had to
Well,
climb, and I think it was because it wasn't quite
yeah,
level, and
yeah,
they needed help in order to get it to that
sure.
spot. Is that,
Well,
I'm gonna be in a better spot, or?
yes and no. Unfortunately, the button operation will be basically the same. You still got to hold the button. But what I can tell you is we got 15-year newer controls. No, we've got 25-year newer controls, because this was a 10-year-old design when it went in. Currently, they're much, much more sophisticated. It's all automated. I mean, it's much more sophisticated controls than what's out there now. So I think it will work much more reliably. It will be hard for it not to go to the right place. Maybe not impossible, but certainly harder.
It seemed like it was hard to get it to.
You're right, absolutely right, yes. Yeah, with the current one, if you stop just a little bit short, you got to go back down a foot and then bring it up again to get it to stop at the right spot. So I think the new one will work much better. Yeah. I don't know what this one is. The new one is 37 seconds from top to bottom. So the full travel takes just over half a minute. It's about a minute and a half for each one to go up and back down. Yes, it's exactly the same size as the current one, because we have no more space to go. Yeah. Unfortunately, we just don't have that many people that are using it. So it's not like we expect to have a lineup in front of it. But you're right, only one person at a time. And it is not designed to carry big TVs. It is not a cargo elevator, period. It is designed to use for people that need the assistance. 750 pounds. That's a standard for all these lifts. That's the code limit. Okay, thank you all. I appreciate you steering it. Sure.